my name is Essi. I'm an elemental medium, and today I'll be talking about how I developed my abilities and how I realized that I am a medium and I have these capabilities. So, the reason I feel like it's so important to talk about this is because I feel that we all have this level of intuition that we haven't tapped into, or we have. And the more we trust our intuition, the more it will grow. And you'll see that throughout this story as well. And I feel like all stories, they have something that you can choose to take away from it. So I hope that this story is beneficial for you in some sense, or maybe you're just curious about what a medium is or myself. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. Let's get into it. Okay, so my story starts out a couple years ago. I entered this relationship and I moved across the country for this relationship. I know, so drastic, so early, mid 20s kind of vibes. And yeah, I'm in my late 20s right now. And basically, when I moved out there, I left a lot of my life behind, like a lot of friends. I left a program at school, and I was really set on this relationship being the relationship where I would settle down and just like have all the dreams that I really desired. And really, in the past 2 years, I've realized how this moment, this chapter of my life, really set me up to learn the lessons that I needed to. And it was one of the hardest chapters of my life for sure. However, I learned so much and I wouldn't give away those lessons for anything. And so I was in this relationship, and slowly I just started hiding myself more and more. And it was a relationship that did have elements of manipulation. And I ended up, like shutting myself down and hiding, downplaying the things that I wanted to do with my life, downplaying the desires and dreams that I had. And so my intuition kept speaking to me every single month through my luteal phase. And in the luteal phase, which is, if you're unaware, the second half of the menstrual cycle, this is very pivotal to the work that I do as well as a cyclical witch, as a cyclical being and medium. But we'll get there. So every month, those thoughts that kind of speak to you around PMS, PMDD, I say it in quotes because I have very much experienced these symptoms, where the thoughts really get loud about the things that you want, or these like impulses that show up less throughout the other parts of the month, but they become really loud as you enter the luteal phase. So yeah, I would enter the luteal phase and these thoughts would get really loud, like, oh, I should go visit my friends, I should go like spend time with my family, or just go back to the city that I lived in before this. And the intuition just kept growing louder and louder. And one day I just decided I was going to listen to it. And I am honestly so grateful that I did. And I drove across the country in the middle of winter, which I would not recommend, especially in Canada. It's very dangerous. But I did make it home after a very synchronistic journey. Flash forward. A few months later, I had been really moving through it, heartbreak wise. However, a lot of this heartbreak was really tied into the fact that I had disconnected from myself. I had abandoned these parts of myself that were really important to me while being in this relationship. And so I ended up going tree planting, which is this job in Canada, which I had done for many years, and I was with my friends. And while we were planting this season, I ended up just feeling like I really needed to move slow. It's like my body was really asking me to move slowly, and also just like being in relation to the land. And planting is very much a job where you have to move fast because you get paid per tree you plant. So the fact that I was like really feeling inclined to move slowly just wasn't working for the job I was doing. However, I did stick it out, and I started to build this relationship to the land that felt very different than any way I had ever connected with the land before. It felt like I needed to like sink into the land and just like sit there and be still and be present for really long periods of time. And we were in like northern BC planting, and I had this relationship with the land already because I'd spent seasons out there. And at the end of the season, I really crashed out, burnt out, ended up staying with my friends for a few weeks in southern BC, on Vancouver Island. And then during that time, they were away for a week, and I ended up just like diving into praying, to meditating, going to bed really early, and journaling a lot. And it became a very spiritual week for me. I would like go swim into the middle of the lake and just lie and stare at the sky. And it was like the most magical thing I had done for myself. And I felt like I was really coming back to parts of myself that I hadn't seen in a really long time. And coincidentally, at the same time, I started having these dreams. And these dreams were feeling more potent and more psychic dreams than I had ever had before. And I started to date someone who I had actually dated years prior, which also we'll get to. But in that process, I had a dream, and it was very much a prophetic dream about him being with this other woman, or this other person, who was very much who I envisioned him to be with, but I didn't envision him to be with me for some reason. And I told him about it, and he was like, oh, that's so strange. Like, I just had a dream about that, like, last night. Like, how did you do that? And so, like, basically I had been viewing his dreams, which is crazy. And at the time I was like, oh, that's kind of funny, like, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't, like, Google it or, like, look into what it could possibly be. So moving forward, we did end up dating, which was a whole other ordeal. And it was a kind of a repetition of me losing myself again. So at the same time, I started working this job, and I ended up having really chronic inflammation. I'm just telling you my life story because it's essential to the developing of my abilities. I feel like it was a very much a fated event when all of this happened, because this job ended up being really detrimental to my health, and environmentally I ended up developing allergies that have continued forward after working this job. And simultaneously that relationship happened, and on the very same day that I quit that job, which I had been building up to quit for months, this guy broke up with me that I was dating. And it was very much a lot at the same time. And I went home and I was just like cleaning my room, and I was kind of starting to realize that cleaning your space can be an act of cleansing. So I was very much doing that for my bedroom. And as I was vacuuming, the Himalayan salt lamp I had fell over, and the bulb broke, but while it was inside the lamp. And glass shattering, which I later found out is very much a divine form of protection. And I truly think that both of those events ending were very much an activation for me of, okay, like, it's time to listen to your abilities, to listen to the possibility of what you're capable of. And yeah, so I left this job with a lot of inflammation, and I wasn't really able to do a lot. And I'm saying this like, I found it really hard to get out of bed, to move my body. I had to drop a lot of physical activity, like movement, exercise, that I really loved doing. But to remedy all the pain that I was experiencing in my body, the inflammation, I started learning about fascia. I started learning about ways to unleash trauma, just like process trauma. I started doing a bunch of trauma informed yoga videos, which were super helpful. I'll link the person below, Kaylee, I think is her name. She's amazing. Like hip openers, psoas, yoga videos, those were game changing for me. And while this was happening, I realized that all the songs that I had been listening to in the chapter that had just kind of wrapped up, the lyrics were speaking to exactly what I was going through. And I started looking into different types of clairs, like clairaudience, and I realized that I very much had that one, that the songs that would pop into my head, that had been popping into my head for like decades, were signs of exactly what I was going through, and how each chapter that I have lived, I have usually listened to a couple albums on repeat, and they have been very much signifiers of what I was going through in that chapter. And so in turn, I decided to go down the rabbit hole of learning about different mediumship abilities, and I would just like kind of communicate to my ancestors as I moved through everyday tasks. And honestly, there was very much like what they call like the dark night of the soul. I had one of those, I'm pretty sure, where I was just like really had to be by myself so much and was crying a lot. But honestly, I was crying because I hadn't felt a lot of feelings that I had pent up in my body for years. So in hand with that emotional release of my fascia, of like physical release of my fascia, sorry, I was releasing these emotions. I was having large memory recall, which I still have now, but it's very much more tame. So yeah, I was feeling like very sensitive to the energy outside. Like just going outside felt like it was a lot of energy. Yeah, going outside was really sucking up my energy because I could just feel absolutely everything. I didn't really know much about like protection. I didn't know about grounding in the same ways that I do now. And I've built very rigid practices around like my psychic protection, of course, because I've had to. So next chapter, I had a bunch of dreams about the situation that I was in right now. And I felt like I was going to be leaving the home that I was living in. And I had just moved in January. And at this point, it was probably about like March, April. And I started having these other prophetic dreams about, yeah, like that I was being told to leave, that my roommates didn't want me there, that I was going to be moving back to Ontario, which is where I live now. And I was like trying not to accept it because I've moved so back and forth in my life. However, I was like, okay, like what is happening? And lo and behold, like a few weeks later, my roommate sat me down and they told me, okay, like you have to move out in like a month or two max. And I was of course like floored, and I was also like, okay, like I was very much right. I already knew this like a month ago. And so I decided to start writing my dreams down, which I have done on and off for a few years, but I would start writing them down like as soon as I woke up. That would be the first thing that I'd do, just taking record of them. And yeah, like a lot of my dreams are very much like obviously prophetic and like will indicate aspects of the future. Also sometimes the past. Sometimes I will see the past in my dreams as well. So what happened after I realized that I had had all those dreams that were predicting what was happening in my life. And so I decided to leave the province. I was living in Vancouver. I moved to Toronto, and on the drive for months, my car hadn't had a working stereo and like radio system, and like all my CDs, they just weren't working anymore. And I was like, dang, like are they all scratched? Is it the system? I don't really know. And so I wasn't able to listen to anything. I had like a Bluetooth speaker that I was using in my car. It's on the older side. And as I drove out of the city, I was like about an hour or two away, and I was like, you know what, like let's just try again. Like let's see if it works, because this is like a 40-50 hour drive. I really hope that my stereo will work. And lo and behold, I turn it on and it works after months of not working. And I was flabbergasted. I was like, okay, something's happening here. And I kept driving. I mean, I was driving for like a while, for like 7 days. And part of the journey, my heat plate started to come off of the bottom of my vehicle. It was mid-June, so fair enough. And I was driving really far. But the interesting part is that when I was driving to Vancouver for the first time, I had a different vehicle, and when I had arrived, my heat plate was also starting to come off, but there were some screws, so I needed to get a friend's help who was connected to my ex at the time, or my ex now, I guess. And so I needed to recruit someone else to help me take off the screw for the heat plate to remove it. And then when I was driving back with this other vehicle, the heat plate was coming off, and I was like, okay, this is very odd. Like this piece of metal is just like in there, and it really just like curved up into the car. And I was lucky enough that it wasn't actually attached anymore. It had just like swifted up into the vehicle, and it didn't damage anything. So I was able to take it out all by myself, and that felt like very synchronistic, very notable. And I was also stopping in places that I had coincidentally stopped at on my drive there. So it was just very like synchronistic in so many aspects, and I really felt as I was traveling that I was collecting old parts of myself, that I was healing this younger version of myself by doing this drive home to a place that I had known so much better and that I knew would care for me for some time. And so yeah, I arrived back and I spent some time at my family's house, and I decided to go traveling. And this was around the time where I was like, okay, like I must be a medium, like there's no other way, because like everything that's happening to me is so synchronistic. And I had a moment like in April where spirit was like, I was communicating with them just kind of like through the ways that I communicate, and I was like, is this actually real? Like, have I just made this up in my head? And spirit was like, you can live the life that you've always been living, or you can choose to live this abundant life that you have always desired. And so I chose to move forward. And that's when everything really catapulted in. So coming back into July, I decided to go traveling internationally for the first time in my life as an adult, which I'm very proud of myself for doing. And I decided to go to Ireland, which I do have some roots there, or like ancestral lineages there. So I went, and when I arrived, I really had a hard coming in. I literally got pulled aside. I almost fainted at customs, is the thing. And I was just like so exhausted, and it felt like I really traveled through this like time thing. And also like I just hadn't eaten in so long, so like, and I wasn't able to sleep on the plane. And I realized that as a medium through my travels, traveling on a plane is a lot harder for me, because I just like really feel everybody's presence and all of their spirits all at the same time, and it's just such a concentration of people, and I've never really been one to like crowds either, so it makes a lot of sense. But now that I was like starting to open up my abilities and connection to communicating with others, it really like felt so overwhelming. So I had just gotten off of the longest flight that I'd had since I was like 15, and yeah, I almost fainted, but I did make it through, thank goodness. And on the other side, I literally, on the other side of customs, like I was just like out in the world. I was like on the bus, and I was looking out the window, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I can literally see the spirits of the land. And it was like the most beautiful but simultaneously overwhelming thing, because like obviously I was so overwhelmed by everything I'd experienced in the span of a few hours, like nervous system wise, and I really just like crashed out for a while, honestly. But nonetheless, I learned a lot solo traveling as a medium, which I can make a whole other video about. But as soon as I just started deciding that yes, I can do this, and trusting my abilities, the more that they slowly pitter-pattered into my life, the more that I developed them. And so many lessons came along the way that really showed me what I am capable of, how I can communicate, how I can communicate best for other people, what I'm willing to offer, and what I desire to offer, because those are very different things, like the things you can do, the things you feel like you should do, and the things that you desire to do. And it's really like funneling, okay, like I can do these things for myself and those I'm connected to. And I decided to post on my Instagram, like, does anyone want free readings, and just like to see what it would be like to channel for other people. And I developed a system pretty quickly to just like channel for people. I also did do like one like mediumship circle online, and I found that helpful, and that was really the first piece of me being like, okay, yeah, like I'm capable of doing this, or one of the pieces, I guess. So yeah, like that's like the opening that I experienced, and it was very, very fast. This all happened in the span of like a couple months, and I'm truly so grateful to be able to communicate for folks, to be able to communicate with the land, because that's a lot of the work that I do. I feel like the stories I'd heard about mediumship in the past, because they had been so specific, I wasn't able to resonate with that, like within my own experiences. Like my own experiences are very connected to the land, and that's how I communicate through readings. A lot of imagery from the land comes through in readings. So the very, very first one that I did in that mediumship practice circle, I ended up channeling for someone, and basically their ancestor was showing me their ancestral lands, and they were the person was fascinated. They were like, I've always wanted to ask about this part of my life. And I was like, oh, like I wonder if this is like something I'm specifically supposed to do. I started like channeling people's like recipes that people like have been disconnected from, like rituals, just ways of being with the land that like their ancestors desire and would also be supportive for them in this moment. And yeah, it's been such a beautiful journey, and I'm so excited to share more on this YouTube channel. Thank you so much for hearing about my life story, at least like for the last few years. And I could also talk about like the year of the snake and the things I shed along this journey, because it really was pivotal to allow myself to communicate in these ways. And I also offer personal readings now, which is so exciting because I feel like I've really funneled in what I want to offer. And those things are channeled readings, which are 20 minutes, 50-minute medium readings, and 90-minute ceremony for all life transitions, and that can be absolutely anything. All the information you need is on my Stan store, and yeah, I'm booking whenever is available. It's all on there. Okay, I hope you have a beautiful day, and I will see you so soon.